constitutional monarchy versus republic, I use the royal wedding as a hook on people's attention to get them interested in this issue, and also for us to examine the alternative. Well, my friend Nick, also known as Pieman97405, wrote me a letter, and this video is an open letter video. He says, "Hi David, it is times like these that I really need a camera. It would be nice to do this as a video. The reason I see a republic as an improvement over the current constitutional monarchy system of the UK is simple. A fully elected government is the correct model for the USA and Britain. If I remember British politics correctly, the House of Commons is the part of the Parliament where the British people elect their representatives, while the House of Lords is mostly appointed, in closed captions. I thank Labour for making it non-hereditary. On top of this, your head of state is unelected and retains their position via divine right. The benefit of a republic is that it will give the people of Britain a fully elected government that will truly represent the British people. It may sound almost trivial, but the idea of being able to vote your leaders has built nations and destroyed empires." I agree with you there, Nick. Some will say that the monarchy acts as a stabilising and unifying influence on our political life. But let's look at two of the most stable, prosperous republics in the world today, or nations in the world today, the United States and Switzerland. Both nations have no royal family and do quite well for themselves. Political stability is not created by a family with a crown, or baubles. It is created by a healthy democracy and constitutional republic. My personal favourite argument for keeping the monarchy is it is great for tourism. The only shred of evidence I can find is that Buckingham Palace is the 17th most popular tourist spot in Britain. If you remember correctly, it was beaten by Legoland. Now, if you may want to know, I suggested a federal republic instead of just a republic. While the current unitary state has worked well for Britain for the last 300 years since Scotland joined in 1707, right? Increasingly, there has been calls for parliaments in the nations that make up Great Britain, i.e. England, Scotland, and Wales, and England doesn't have a parliament of its own. The nations that make up Great Britain. I do believe that giving each of the home nations as much autonomy as one of the US states would have, and having a federal government will strengthen Britain. All four nations will get a parliament and be in charge of regional affairs, while the national government can handle larger issues, say foreign relations or healthcare. It would also quiet down regionalism. I think he means nationalism within the various home nations. One of the biggest pluses for a republic is finally having a written constitution, be it yours or something else. A written constitution, he's referring to my constitution that I wrote for England. A written constitution will be a greater stabiliser for Britain. I am not saying that Britain is unstable, but an unwritten constitution can put too much power in the hands of the government. It's a hell of a lot harder to dodge something Mr. Smith can read. If you've got any specific questions or want to ask me, point out anything I missed, let me know, and otherwise I look forward to your video. And this is the video. All the best, Nick. So that was the open letter. But let's examine what constitutional things are actually happening. It's unlikely that my constitution will ever be part of the English constitution, although in my own view it is brilliant, because I've taken elements of Swedish social democracy, German social democracy, the English constitution of elements of the English and German constitution, where we split the role of head of state from the Prime Minister, or the President in Germany from the Chancellor, and I set out a way that we could have a monarchy and a president at the same time by making the monarchy head of the Church of England, but having them like a Vatican state with Buckingham Palace and Balmoral, so the Scots could decide whether the Queen was still Queen of Scotland as well as of England, or what the state would be, which would be the UK, with Buckingham Palace at its heart, Northern Ireland and Scotland and Wales. You get the idea, like the Vatican, and overseas territories and dominions, which are still part of the British Empire, although diminished. But that's enough about my constitution. What is really happening? Well, England will get a written constitution, although it has a de facto constitution in the Lisbon Treaty, and we have a de facto president, Herman van Rompuy, in the European Union, as the head of the European Union, and Barroso is head of the European Union Civil Service, which we get a right to vote about, which we don't get to vote about our own civil service, because the European Commission is the civil service of Europe. There's some transparency that you get in Europe that you don't get in our constitution, because our constitution is unwritten. But our constitution is going to be written, and luckily for me, since I wrote a constitution mostly based on the German and Swedish constitutions and the United States Constitution, the people who are actually writing a modern constitution for Britain, which will obviously include the monarch as head of state, which is one of my gripes as an ardent Republican in the past, but the monarchy does stop dictatorship, so, you know, from the various competing feudal crime family factions can't actually become head of state because they can't get rid of the monarchy, which is a paradox. But the people who are actually writing the British Constitution will make it in line with Europe, so we'll have a president, and they'll make it in line with the British Constitution. The wealth of it is actually, there's more written about the unwritten part of the British Constitution, because it takes all the acts of Parliament, all the laws and precedents of the law courts, so it's vast. It's so vast it's unreadable and thus unwritten. Hundreds of books make up our constitution. And I apologise for quoting Thomas Hobbes in his correspondence with Tom Paine, although I've just done it again, because it was Edmund Burke who was supporting the idea of a crowned republic, is what we really are. And he was the one who was corresponding with Thomas Paine. My analysis was based on Edmund Burke, but I said Thomas Hobbes by mistake. Sorry about that. But check out the other videos in this series, and get more into the constitutional side of things. Send me comments and rate this video as well. But as I said, we now have had many constitutional issues solved. We have a Supreme Court which is linked with the European Court of Human Rights. We have an almost partially elected second house in the House of Lords. Some people are still appointed. If there's a Labour government in it, will probably be changed to a Senate like the United States. And so our constitution, because it's flexible and evolves, is perhaps even more radical than the American Constitution, although we haven't yet achieved a constitutional republic, as Nick said. But our problem is that we have a lot of crime in this country, and very powerful criminals might be able to influence who becomes head of state, and that's what we don't want, and that's why we keep the monarchy. And that's about as much as I'm going to talk about on that subject, because it's quite controversial. But the monarch's position is still on the Winston Churchill model, and Edmund Burke's model, that no one challenges the monarch unless they interfere with Parliament, and thus they can be removed, and they have been removed as they were in the Civil War, or they can be removed legally by forcing their abdication, as possibly happened with one of the kings in the one of the people who was going to be king in the 30s, because he married an American.